Picture this: you're sitting at your desk, staring at a mountain of tasks that need to get done, yet here you are, mindlessly scrolling through your phone again. Sound familiar? Today, I'm going to share a 60-second technique from Japan that completely transformed how I think about procrastination. This isn't just another self-help tip that you'll forget about tomorrow. This is a time-tested method that has already helped millions of Japanese people boost their productivity and reclaim control over their lives. Over the next 30 minutes, I'm not just going to teach you this technique. I'm going to dive deep into why 90% of people fail at beating procrastination and how this simple Japanese method can completely revolutionize your approach to getting things done. By the end of this video, you'll have a practical system that you can implement immediately, backed by both ancient wisdom and modern neuroscience. So here's what we're going to cover today. First, I'll reveal why traditional anti-procrastination advice usually fails and the critical mistakes most people make. Then, I'll walk you through the fascinating history and scientific foundation behind this 60-second Japanese technique. After that, we'll dive into a complete step-by-step tutorial with real demonstrations and common pitfalls to avoid. Finally, I'll share some incredible success stories and show you how to customize this method for your specific situation. If you've been struggling with procrastination, or if you've tried various methods before, but they just didn't stick, this video is going to give you a completely fresh perspective and a practical solution that actually works. Let's get started. Before we dive into the Japanese method, we need to understand why everything you've tried before probably didn't work. The truth about procrastination is far different from what most productivity gurus will tell you. The biggest myth about beating procrastination is that it's all about willpower. We're told to just push through, be more disciplined, find our motivation. But here's the problem. Willpower is like a muscle that gets tired. You can flex it for a while, but eventually it gives out. That's why you can feel super motivated on Sunday night planning your week, but by Wednesday you're back to your old habits. Motivation is equally unreliable. It comes and goes like the weather one day. You're fired up and ready to conquer the world. The next day, you can barely get out of bed. Building a productivity system based on motivation is like building a house on sand. It might work for a while, but it's not sustainable. Most importantly, traditional advice lacks a systematic approach. We're given isolated tips and tricks, but no coherent framework that addresses the root psychological causes of procrastination. It's like trying to treat symptoms without addressing the underlying disease. So, what are those underlying causes? The first major factor is fear of failure. When we procrastinate, we're often not avoiding the task itself. We're avoiding the possibility of not doing it perfectly. Our brain creates this elaborate defense mechanism where if we don't try our hardest, we can always tell ourselves we could have done better if we really wanted to. Then there's perfectionism, which is just fear of failure, dressed up in fancy clothes. Perfectionists often procrastinate because they set impossibly high standards for themselves. They'd rather not start than risk producing something that doesn't meet their unrealistic expectations. Finally, our brains are wired for immediate gratification in prehistoric times. This served us well. But in today's world, where most meaningful work requires delayed gratification, this ancient wiring works against us. Your brain literally releases more dopamine from scrolling social media than from making progress on that important project. Tell me in the comments, what type of task do you procrastinate on most? Is it creative, work, administrative tasks, or something else entirely? Now, let me introduce you to the Japanese philosophy that changed everything for me, Kaizen. In Japanese culture, there's this beautiful concept called Kaizen, which literally means change for the better or continuous improvement. But it's not about massive transformations or dramatic life overhauls. It's about making tiny, almost impossibly small improvements every single day. This philosophy emerged in post-World War II Japan, when the country needed to rebuild itself from the ground up. Instead of trying to make huge leaps, Japanese companies focused on small, incremental improvements. Toyota, for example, built their entire production system around this principle. They didn't try to revolutionize car manufacturing overnight. They made thousands of tiny improvements, day after day, year after year. This approach is fundamentally different from Western thinking, which often focuses on big goals, dramatic changes, and breakthrough moments. We love the idea of the overnight success, the life-changing moment, the dramatic transformation. But real, lasting change usually happens much more quietly. The neuroscience backs this up beautifully. When we try to make big changes, our brain's alarm system, the amygdala, kicks in and triggers our fight-or-flight response. It interprets change as danger. But when changes are small enough, they slip under the radar of this alarm system. The brain doesn't perceive tiny changes as threatening, so it doesn't resist them. Here's where it gets really interesting. Every time we complete a small task, our brain releases a small hit of dopamine. This is the same neurotransmitter involved in addiction, but we're hacking it for good. Each small success creates a positive feedback loop that makes us want to do more. It's like compound interest for your productivity. But why 60 seconds specifically? Research shows that our attention spans operate in natural cycles. Most people can maintain focused attention for short bursts before their minds start to wander. 60 seconds is long enough to make meaningful progress, but short enough that your brain doesn't have time to build up resistance. It's also short enough that you can't really make excuses. Everyone has 60 seconds. Let me share a real example from a major Japanese corporation. Toshiba implemented a version of this principle in their manufacturing process. Instead of trying to solve major production problems all at once, they asked workers to spend just 1 minute each day identifying and fixing small inefficiencies. Over the course of a year, these 1-minute improvements resulted in millions of dollars in savings and dramatically improved product quality. Now, let's get into the practical details of how this actually works. The core principle of the 60-second Japanese technique is deceptively simple. Commit to working on any task for exactly 60 seconds with no obligation to continue beyond that. But here's the key that most people miss. This isn't about accomplishing huge amounts in 60 seconds. It's about overcoming the initial resistance that keeps us stuck. The hardest part of any task isn't the middle or the end, it's the beginning. Once you start, momentum takes over. Let me walk you through the exact 5-step process. Step 1. Identify and break down your task. Look at whatever you've been procrastinating on and break it down into the smallest possible component. If you need to write a report, don't think about writing the entire report. Think about opening the document. If you need to exercise, don't think about a full workout. Think about putting on your exercise clothes. The key here is to make the task so small that it feels almost silly not to do it. You want to eliminate every possible excuse your brain might come up with. If your brain says, "I don't have time," 60 seconds proves that wrong. If it says, "I'm not in the mood," 60 seconds isn't long enough to need to be in the mood. Step 2. Set your timer and prepare mentally. Use an actual timer, not just a rough estimate. There's something powerful about the physical act of setting a timer and watching it count down. Before you start, take 3 deep breaths and remind yourself that you only need to commit to 60 seconds, nothing more. Step 3. Focus completely for those 60 seconds. This means no distractions, no multitasking, no checking your phone. Just pure, focused attention on that one small task. If your mind wanders, gently bring it back to the task. Remember, it's only 60 seconds. Step 4. When the timer goes off, stop and evaluate. How do you feel? Did you make progress? Do you want to continue? or are you satisfied with stopping? This evaluation step is crucial because it helps you build self-awareness about your patterns and preferences. Step 5. Decide whether to continue or stop. Here's the beautiful part. Both choices are perfectly valid. If you want to keep going because you've built momentum, fantastic. If you want to stop because you fulfilled your commitment, that's also fantastic. You've succeeded either way. Let me demonstrate this right now with something I've been putting off. I have this pile of papers on my desk that I've been meaning to organize for weeks. Normally, I think I need to organize all these papers and immediately feel overwhelmed. But using the 60-second method, I'm just going to commit to sorting through papers for exactly 60 seconds. Look at that. In just 60 seconds, I managed to sort about a third of these papers into 3 clear piles. I don't feel overwhelmed anymore, and actually, I kind of want to keep going. But I'm going to stop here to prove the point. 60 seconds of progress is still progress, and it's infinitely better than 0 seconds of progress. Now, let me share some advanced variations of this technique. For creative tasks like writing or design, you might use the 60 seconds just to brainstorm ideas or create rough sketches. For administrative tasks, you might use it to organize your workspace or respond to one email. For learning, you might use it to review flashcards or read one page of a textbook. You can also combine this method with other productivity systems. If you use Getting Things Done, use the 60-second rule to process items in your inbox. If you use the Pomodoro technique, use 60-second sessions as a warm-up before your 25-minute focus blocks. For building long-term habits, the 60-second rule is incredibly powerful. Instead of committing to exercise for an hour every day, commit to 60 seconds of movement. Instead of trying to meditate for 20 minutes, start with 60 seconds of deep breathing. These tiny commitments are sustainable, and once they become automatic, you can gradually increase them. Let me share some real success stories from people who've implemented this method. I started using this technique myself about 2 years ago when I was struggling to maintain consistency with my content creation. I had grand plans to write for hours every day, but I kept failing to follow through. So I decided to commit to just 60 seconds of writing every morning. That's it. Some days I would write for exactly 60 seconds and then stop. Other days, those 60 seconds would turn into an hour of inspired writing. Over the course of 6 months, this simple practice helped me write more consistently than I had in years. I completed 3 major projects that I had been procrastinating on for months. Here's an email I received from Sarah, a college student. I was failing my statistics class because I kept putting off studying. The material seemed so overwhelming that I couldn't even start. Then I tried your 60-second method. I committed to looking at just one statistics problem for 60 seconds each day. Some days that's all I did, but other days I got into a flow and studied for hours. I ended up getting a B+ in the class, and more importantly, I'm not afraid of math anymore. Another success story comes from Mike, a project manager. I had this presentation that I needed to create for my boss, and I kept putting it off for weeks. Every time I thought about it, I felt this wave of anxiety. Using the 60-second method, I started by just opening PowerPoint for 60 seconds. The next day, I created one slide. By the end of the week, I had finished the entire presentation. My boss was so impressed that she asked me to present it to the entire leadership team. This method works across all kinds of different areas for fitness. I know people who started with 60 seconds of jumping jacks and eventually built up to full workout routines. For reading, 60 seconds of reading before bed has helped people get through dozens of books they had been meaning to read. For organizing, 60 seconds of decluttering has helped people transform their living spaces. The key insight is that the technique works because it addresses the psychological barriers to getting started, not just the practical ones. Most procrastination happens in our heads, not in the real world. But let me warn you about some common mistakes that can sabotage your success with this method. The biggest mistake is misunderstanding what 60 seconds means. This isn't about cramming as much as possible into 60 seconds or working frantically. It's about working calmly and focused for exactly 60 seconds. No more, no less. Another common mistake is choosing tasks that are too big or complex. Remember, you want to choose the smallest possible component of a larger task. If you choose something too ambitious, you'll feel frustrated when 60 seconds isn't enough to make meaningful progress. Lack of consistency is another major pitfall. The power of this method comes from repetition, not from individual sessions. It's better to do 60 seconds every day for a week than to do 10 minutes once and never do it again. Many people also fall into the perfectionism trap even with such a small time commitment. They think, if I'm only going to work for 60 seconds, it has to be perfect. This completely misses the point. The goal is progress, not perfection. Another mistake is having unrealistic expectations about results. This method isn't magic. It won't transform your life overnight. But if you stick with it consistently, the cumulative effect can be remarkable. Finally, many people give up too quickly. They try it for a few days, don't see dramatic changes, and conclude it doesn't work. Remember, this is about building sustainable habits, not achieving quick fixes. Let me address the most common concern I hear. Won't I just keep stopping after 60 seconds and never actually finish anything? In my experience, and in the experience of most people who use this method consistently, the opposite happens. Once you overcome the initial resistance and start building momentum, you often want to continue working. But even if you do stop after 60 seconds every single time, you're still better off than if you never started at all. 60 seconds of progress daily adds up to more than 30 hours of work over the course of a year. That's enough to make significant progress on almost any project. Now, let's talk about how to adapt this method to your specific personality and circumstances. If you're an introvert, you might find that 60 seconds of focused work feels more natural and sustainable than trying to power through longer work sessions. Introverts often prefer depth over breadth, and this method honors that preference. If you're an extrovert, you might want to use the 60-second method as a launching pad for longer periods of work. The key is not to fight against your natural energy patterns, but to work with them. For highly sensitive people, the low-pressure nature of this method can be particularly helpful. There's no stress, no deadline pressure, no performance anxiety. It's just 60 seconds of gentle progress. If you have attention deficit challenges, this method can be a game changer because it works with your brain's natural tendency toward hyperfocus. Instead of fighting against your attention patterns, you're using short bursts of focused attention strategically. You can also integrate this method with existing productivity systems. If you use Getting Things Done, use the 60-second rule for your weekly review or for processing your inbox. If you use time blocking, use 60-second sessions as transitions between different types of work. Digital tools can support this practice, but they're not necessary. A simple timer on your phone is all you need. Some people like apps that track their consistency, but remember that the simplicity of this method is part of its power. Don't overcomplicate it. Let me summarize the key points that make this 60-second Japanese method so effective. First, simplicity beats complexity every time. The reason most productivity systems fail is that they're too complicated to maintain long-term. This method is so simple that it's almost impossible to mess up. Second, consistency beats intensity. It's better to work for 60 seconds every day than to work for 6 hours once a week. Small, regular actions compound over time to create remarkable results. Third, starting beats planning. Most procrastination happens because we spend more time thinking about doing something than actually doing it. This method forces you to take action, even if it's tiny action. The 60-second method works because it addresses the root cause of procrastination, the psychological resistance to getting started. Once you start, momentum takes over. Once momentum takes over, progress becomes natural. But here's the most important point. Don't let this video become another piece of content that you consume but never act on. The information is valuable, but information without action is worthless. So here's my challenge for you. As soon as this video ends, I want you to try the 60-second rule with one task that you've been procrastinating on. It doesn't matter how small or insignificant it seems. Just pick something and commit to 60 seconds. Then, come back to the comments and share your experience. Tell me what task you chose, how it felt, and whether you decided to continue beyond the 60 seconds or stop. Did you encounter any unexpected resistance or surprises? Use the hashtag 60-second challenge when you share your progress on other social platforms. Let's build a community of people who are committed to making small, consistent progress instead of waiting for perfect conditions or perfect motivation. If this video helped you understand procrastination differently and gave you a practical tool to overcome it, please hit the subscribe button. I share science-based productivity techniques like this every week, and I'm committed to helping you build a more effective and fulfilling life. You can also check out my other videos about Japanese time management philosophy, or watch this playlist to learn more productivity methods that are backed by research, not just motivational fluff. Remember this, change doesn't require perfection. It just requires starting. Give yourself 60 seconds today and see what happens. You might be surprised by what you can accomplish when you stop overthinking and start doing. Small steps lead to big changes, and every expert was once a beginner. Your journey toward beating procrastination starts with just 60 seconds. I believe in you, and I can't wait to hear about your progress. See you in the next video.